been clear that morning when the massive ship appeared over Seoul. News channels worldwide broadcast the first contact event as the Galactic Confederation finally revealed themselves to humanity. 6 months later, Jin Park stood in her quarters, aboard the alien vessel Harmonious Exchange, staring at her reflection in the strange metallic surface that served as a mirror. "This uniform still feels weird," she muttered to herself, adjusting the blue-gray diplomatic attire that marked her. As Earth's first official representative, the former naval officer had been selected for her calm demeanor and quick thinking, qualities the selection committee believed would serve humanity well among the stars. Jin completed her morning routine and headed to the ship's communal dining area. As she entered, conversations hushed. The dozen alien species aboard still weren't used to having a Deathworlder in their midst. "Good morning, Lieutenant Commander Jin," chirped Tak, a bird-like alien with brilliant orange plumage. As the diplomatic officer assigned to help Jin adjust to life aboard, Tak had shown the most interest in human customs. "Did you achieve adequate rest cycles?" Jin smiled. "Just Jin is fine, Tak, and yes, I slept well." The avian diplomat rustled his feathers in what Jin had learned was a sign of pleasure. "Excellent. Captain Mool wishes to speak with you after the morning meal about our upcoming visit to the Rigelian outpost." At a nearby table, Dr. Nemo, the ship's chief medical officer, watched Jin with wide, unblinking eyes. The amphibious alien skin shimmered with a faint blue glow as Jin approached the food dispensers. "Good morning, Doctor," Jin said, selecting what she hoped was the synthesized equivalent of coffee. "Observer Jin," Nemo acknowledged with a slight bow of his elongated head. "Have your episodes subsided?" Jin paused, cup halfway to her lips. "Episodes? The violent tremors you experienced during your private hours. Several crew members have expressed concern." Jin nearly choked on her drink. "I'm sorry, what violent tremors?" Before Nemo could respond, the ship's communication system chimed. Captain Mool's voice echoed through the chamber. "Lieutenant Commander Jin, please report to the observation deck immediately." Jin set down her unfinished breakfast with an apologetic nod to her companions. As she left, she didn't notice Tak and Nemo exchanging worried glances. The observation deck offered a spectacular view of space through transparent walls that somehow maintained the ship's atmosphere. Captain Mool, a tall, slender being with 4 arms and gray-green skin, stood with his back to the door. "You wanted to see me, Captain?" Mool turned, compound eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yes, Observer Jin. I wanted to discuss something of a delicate nature." Jin straightened her posture. "I'm listening." "Our ship's monitoring systems have detected unusual activity in your quarters during your personal time." Mool's upper hands made a gesture that Jin recognized as discomfort. "We understand different species have different needs, but your safety is our concern." "My safety?" Jin's confusion was growing by the minute. Mool activated a holographic display. On it appeared footage of Jin's quarters from the previous evening. Jin watched herself performing her nightly kickboxing routine, shadowboxing, practicing kicks, and running through combinations she'd learned during her military training. "Oh," Jin said, relief washing over her. "This is just exercise." "Exercise." Mool repeated the word carefully. "This appears to be simulated combat against invisible opponents. Our ship's medical AI has identified elevated heart rate, increased adrenaline production, and muscle micro-tearing. These are indicators of distress in most species." Jin couldn't help but laugh, which only seemed to concern the captain more. "Captain, humans need physical activity to stay healthy. This is a normal workout routine, something millions of people on Earth do daily." The captain's secondary eyes blinked rapidly. "You deliberately damage your muscle tissue. For health?" "The tears heal stronger," Jin explained. "It's how we build strength and endurance." "Fascinating," Mool murmured. "And the simulated violence?" "It's called martial arts. It keeps my reflexes sharp and helps me manage stress." "Stress?" Mool's voice took on a concerned tone. "Is our environment causing you distress?" Jin realized the cultural gap was wider than she'd thought. No. It's just something humans do." It's actually relaxing for us." The captain's top set of arms crossed in what Jin had learned was their gesture of deep thought. "Our classification of Earth as a death world may need revision. If violence is relaxing—" "It's not violence," Jin corrected gently. "It's controlled practice, like mental focus through physical movement." Before Mool could respond, the ship's alert system activated. "Captain," announced the ship's AI, "a Crest diplomatic vessel has requested permission to dock. They wish to join our delegation to the Rigelian outpost." Mool's skin paled slightly. "The Crests? Now?" He turned to Jin. "The Crest hegemony is a warrior culture. They rarely engage in diplomatic missions. Is that a problem?" Jin asked. "Not necessarily," Mool said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "However, they can be challenging. Their society values physical dominance above all else. Most Confederation species find interactions with them stressful." Jin nodded thoughtfully. "Well, good thing you have a Deathworlder on your team then." As Jin left the observation deck, she didn't see Mool accessing the ship's database, reviewing Earth's military history with growing fascination. Nor did she notice the small hovering medical drone that Nemo had programmed to follow her discreetly, monitoring her vital signs for further episodes. That evening, as the Crest ship approached, Jin returned to her quarters, unaware that her regular workout routine was being observed, not only by the concerned Confederation crew, but now also by the approaching warriors, who watched with very different interest than concern. 2 weeks had passed since the Crest delegation arrived on Egg, the Harmonious Exchange, and Jin was starting to feel like a lab specimen. Everywhere she went, she noticed crew members watching her. Some tried to be subtle about it. Others, like Dr. Nemo, made no attempt to hide their scrutiny. This morning, Jin had arrived at the ship's exercise chamber earlier than usual. She needed space to breathe without alien eyes studying her every move. The room was equipped with various devices designed for the physical maintenance of different species, none quite suitable for human workouts. She'd made do by repurposing equipment and using her own body weight for resistance training. Jin wrapped her hands with the cloth strips she'd brought from Earth and began her warm-up routine. Jumping jacks, high knees, and dynamic stretches got her blood flowing. She moved into shadowboxing, throwing punches and kicks at imaginary opponents while keeping her core tight. "Your form has improved." Skyhead Jin spun around to find Tak standing in the doorway, orange feathers ruffled in what she now recognized as excitement. "How long have you been watching me?" Jin asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Only 7 minutes," Tak said, stepping into the room. "Captain Mool asked me to deliver these." He held out a small container filled with blue patches. "Dr. Nemo synthesized them. They're supposed to reduce the inflammation in your muscle tissue during your episodes." Jin sighed. "They're not episodes, Tak. I've explained this." "Yes, you call it working out or training." Tak's head tilted curiously. "But why inflict such stress on your body?" The medical scans show elevated cortisol levels, micro tears in muscle fibers, and increased heart rate. By Confederation medical standards, these are all indicators of physical distress. Jin grabbed a towel and sat on a nearby bench, gesturing for Tak to join her. "Humans are built differently. These stress indicators actually help us grow stronger. Without regular physical challenges, our bodies become weak." Tak settled beside her, careful to keep his wings tucked neatly behind him. "Like plants that need wind to develop strong stems?" "Exactly." Jin smiled, grateful for the comparison. "Without resistance, we can't build strength." "But the combat movements," Tak continued, mimicking a punch awkwardly with his wing. "Why practice fighting when there are no enemies aboard?" Before Jin could answer, a low rumbling voice interrupted them. "Perhaps the human understands more than you give her credit for, Bird." Jin looked up to see 3 massive figures in the doorway. The Crests had arrived. Their bodies resembled armored reptiles standing upright, with thick plates covering vital areas and powerful tails that helped them balance. The speaker, larger than the others with distinctive red markings along his crest, stepped forward. Commander. Talk of the crest hegemony. He introduced himself with a short bow that seemed almost mocking. We were told we might find Earth's representative here. Jin stood and returned the bow, maintaining eye contact as she'd been briefed was important when dealing with crests. Lieutenant Commander Jin Park. Welcome to the exercise chamber. Doc's yellow eyes narrowed as he looked around the room. Exercise? Is that what you call combat preparation in human terms? Tak fluttered nervously. Commander Jin was merely engaging in stress relief activities prescribed by our medical team. Doc laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. The Confederation coddles you, human. They see your warrior spirit and try to medicate it away. It's not, Jin began, but Doc cut her off. We've been watching the surveillance feeds. Your species intrigues us. Small, soft-skinned, yet you move with purpose. Your techniques are unusual but effective. Jin felt a chill. The crests had been spying on her workouts too. I'm just maintaining my physical condition, she said carefully. Of course, Doc replied with what might have been a smile, revealing rows of pointed teeth. As all warriors must. After the crests departed, Tak's feathers were fully puffed in distress. This is concerning. The crests rarely show interest in other species unless they're evaluating potential threats or allies. Maybe they're just curious, Jin suggested, though she didn't believe it herself. Later that day, Jin found herself summoned to Dr. Nemo's medical bay. The amphibious doctor hovered near a display showing what Jin recognized as her own brain scans. These readings are troubling, Nemo said without preamble. Your brain produces unusual chemicals during your physical episodes. We've developed a treatment plan. Jin looked at the complex charts and diagrams. Doctor, with all due respect, I don't need treatment. What you're seeing is normal human physiology during exercise. Nemo blinked his large eyes slowly. Observer, Jin, your species evolved on a high-gravity world with dangerous predators and extreme climate variations. It's natural that your bodies and minds would develop abnormally. There's no shame in accepting help. Abnormally? Jin felt her patience wearing thin. Doctor, humans have been practicing martial arts for thousands of years. It's not just about fighting. It's about discipline, focus, and self-improvement. Nemo made a gesture that translated roughly to skepticism. Yet the movements clearly simulate combat scenarios. Yes, because those skills might be needed someday, Jin admitted. But mainly, it's tradition and personal development. The doctor turned to a cabinet and removed a vial of purple liquid. I've synthesized this compound to help regulate your neurochemical fluctuations. It should reduce your aggressive impulses and need for these rituals. Jin didn't reach for the offered medication. I appreciate your concern, but I won't be taking that. But your condition is not a condition, Jin finished firmly. It's who I am, who humans are. As Jin left the medical bay, she nearly collided with Captain Mool in the corridor. Observer Jin, the captain acknowledged. I was just coming to find you. The Crest delegation has made an unusual request. Something in the captain's tone made Jin wary. What kind of request? They've invited you to join them for a cultural exchange this evening. Mool's 4 hands made nervous gestures. Normally, I would decline on your behalf. The Crest's idea of cultural exchange can be not intense. You think they want to fight me, Jin stated flatly. Not officially, Mool said carefully. But yes, I believe they wish to test your capabilities. I've already begun drafting a diplomatic refusal. Jin thought for a moment. No. Tell them I accept. Mool's compound eyes widened. Observer Jin, the Crest are bred for combat. Their bones are dense, their skin naturally armored. It would be dangerous. Jin smiled. Captain, remember when you thought my workouts were signs of mental distress? Trust me when I say humans are more capable than you think. As Mool reluctantly departed to deliver her acceptance, Jin couldn't help feeling a strange excitement. For weeks, the Confederation species had been treating her like a fragile, psychologically damaged curiosity. The Crests, for all their aggression, were the first aliens to see her as something else. Maybe it was time to show everyone exactly what a human could do. Word spread quickly through the harmonious exchange about Jin's upcoming cultural exchange with the Crests. By evening, Jin could feel the tension in the air as she walked the corridors. Passing crew members gave her looks that ranged from curiosity to what seemed like pity. The ship's central gathering hall had been cleared for the event. When Jin arrived, she found a surprising number of spectators lining the walls. Representatives from every species aboard had come to watch. In the center of the room, Commander Doc stood with his two Crest companions, their armored bodies gleaming under the lights. Captain Moole hurried over as soon as Jin entered. "Observer Jin, there's still time to reconsider," he said quietly. "No one would question your decision to withdraw." "I appreciate the concern, Captain, but I'll be fine." Jin rolled her shoulders, feeling the comfortable stretch of muscles warmed up from her pre-meeting exercises. "You don't understand," Moole insisted, all four of his hands making agitated movements. "The Crests have selected Krav as your opponent." He nodded toward the largest of the three reptilian aliens, whose scales bore numerous scars. "He serves as their security chief. Before joining diplomatic service, he was an arena champion on their home world." Jin studied her opponent with newfound interest. Krav stood nearly 7 feet tall, with muscles visible even beneath his natural armor plating. His tail thumped against the floor in what Jin guessed was anticipation. "The terms are simple demonstration combat only," Moole continued. "First to yield or become incapacitated. They've agreed to no permanent damage, but—" "It'll be fine," Jin repeated, more firmly this time. She began unwrapping the cloth from her bag to bind her hands. Before she could finish, Tak burst into the room, feathers completely puffed out in distress. The avian diplomat rushed to Jin's side, followed closely by Dr. Nemo. "Jin, we just heard." Tak's voice came out as an alarmed chirp. "This is madness. The Crests are naturally armored predators from a high-gravity world." "So am I," Jin replied with a small smile. "Well, minus the armor part." Dr. Nemo extended a webbed hand holding a small injector. "At least take this before you begin. It will increase your pain threshold and promote rapid cellular regeneration." Jin gently pushed the device away. "No drugs, doctor. I need to feel everything if I'm going to do this properly." "But your safety," Nemo began, "is my responsibility," Jin finished. She looked between her two alien friends, seeing genuine concern in their expressions. Something softened in her. "Look, I know you both think I'm fragile or damaged in some way, but those episodes you've been so worried about, they're preparation for exactly this kind of situation." Tak's head tilted in confusion. "You expected to fight the Crests?" "Not specifically," Jin admitted, "but humans have always trained to face the unexpected. It's part of who we are." Before they could argue further, Commander Doc's rumbling voice called across the room. "Is Earth's representative ready to begin? Or do her keepers need more time to fuss over her?" Jin gave her friends a reassuring nod and stepped forward into the cleared circle. The watching crowd grew quiet as she approached Krav, the size difference between them obvious to everyone. Jin barely reached the middle of his chest. "The terms are simple," Doc announced to the gathering. "This is demonstration combat only. Victory by yield or incapacitation. No permanent damage is to be inflicted." He looked between the two combatants. "Are these terms acceptable?" "Acceptable," Krav growled, his voice even deeper than Doc's. "Acceptable," Jin echoed, rolling her neck one final time. Doc stepped back. "Begin when ready." Krav didn't waste time. He charged forward with surprising speed for his size, one massive arm swinging in what would have been a devastating blow if it had connected. Jin stepped inside the arc of his swing, delivered 2 quick strikes to what she hoped was a sensitive area under his arm, and danced away before his other hand could grab her. The Crest grunted, more in surprise than pain. "Quick," he acknowledged, adjusting his stance. The next exchange came faster. Krav feinted with his tail, then lunged with both arms extended. Jin ducked under one grasping hand but couldn't entirely avoid the other. Powerful fingers wrapped around her upper arm, and She found herself lifted off the ground. A collective gasp rose from the Confederation spectators. Captain Moole took a half-step forward before Doc's warning glance stopped him. Jin didn't panic. Instead, she used the momentum of being lifted to swing her legs up and around, landing a solid kick to the side of Krav's head. The blow forced him to release his grip, and Jin dropped into a roll that brought her back to her feet a safe distance away. Now the room was completely silent. The crests watched with newfound interest, while the Confederation species seemed frozen in shock. Krav rubbed the side of his head, his expression unreadable to Jin. "You've trained for combat against larger opponents," he stated. Jin nodded, keeping her guard up. "All humans train for different scenarios." "All humans." There was definite surprise in Krav's voice. "Well, not all," Jin admitted, "but many. It's part of our cultures across Earth." This time when Krav attacked, he was more cautious. The two circled each other, exchanging probing strikes. Jin landed more hits, but they seemed to do little against the crest's natural armor. Meanwhile, she had to stay constantly moving to avoid his powerful but increasingly precise attacks. 10 minutes into the match, both combatants were showing signs of exertion. Jin's breathing was controlled but heavy, while Krav's movements had slowed slightly. The watching crowd had given up any pretense of diplomatic neutrality. They were fully engaged in the spectacle. During a brief pause in the action, Jin caught sight of Tak and Nemo watching with expressions she couldn't quite interpret. Not fear for her safety anymore, but something else. Confusion mixed with dawning realization. "Enough warm-up," Krav suddenly announced. "Show me what Deathworlders really can do." He launched into his most aggressive attack yet, a combination of strikes that forced Jin completely on the defensive. For nearly 30 seconds, she could do nothing but block, dodge, and retreat. The Confederation spectators grew visibly distressed, certain they were witnessing the inevitable end of the match. Jin felt her back press against the edge of the circle. Nowhere left to retreat. Krav, sensing victory, committed fully to a powerful overhead strike that would end the contest. It was exactly what Jin had been waiting for. At the last possible moment, she dropped and slid between the crest's legs. Before he could turn, she was up and launching herself onto his back. Her arm snaked around his thick neck, finding the pressure point she'd been looking for since the match began, a spot where the armor plates met, exposing a small area of softer tissue. Applying precise pressure, Jin executed a textbook blood choke. Krav thrashed, trying to dislodge her, but she locked her legs around his torso and maintained the hold. Within seconds, the massive crest's movements grew uncoordinated. 3 seconds later, his knees buckled. Jin released the hold the instant. She felt him going limp, guiding his fall so he wouldn't injure himself hitting the floor. She stepped back, hands raised to show she was stopping the attack. The entire hall was silent as Krav lay on the ground. After 5 tense seconds, the crest coughed and pushed himself up to a sitting position. He looked at Jin with what seemed like newfound respect. "I yield," he stated clearly, his voice carrying through the silent room. The gathered crowd remained frozen in disbelief until Commander Doc began a slow, deliberate clapping that echoed through the chamber. The other crests joined, followed hesitantly by the Confederation species. Captain Moole looked as though his understanding of the universe had been fundamentally altered. Tak's feathers were fully extended in what Jin now recognized as awe, not distress. And Dr. Nemo was frantically taking notes on a small device, muttering about reassessing human capabilities. Krav rose to his feet and approached Jin. Following what she'd learned of crest customs, she extended her arm. The security chief clasped it in the traditional warrior's grip. "The Confederation has been studying you incorrectly," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They see your combat preparation and think it illness. They mistake warrior discipline for psychological damage." He turned to address the crowd. "This human is not broken. She is a warrior, as all Deathworlders must be to survive their harsh world." Jin caught Tak and Nemo exchanging glances, something finally clicking into place for them. "Those weren't episodes," Tak said quietly. "They were training." "For this," Nemo added, comprehension dawning. All along you were preparing, Jin nodded. Not specifically for fighting crests, but yes. Humans don't exercise just for health. We prepare for challenges. It's in our nature. As the gathering broke into excited discussions, Commander Doc approached Jin with something that might have been a smile on his reptilian face. Well fought, human. Tomorrow we begin real training. Clearly the Confederation has been wasting your potential. Jin looked around at the transformed expressions of the crew, no longer concern or pity, but a new kind of respect and curiosity. Perhaps now they would finally begin to understand humans for what they truly were. The day after Jin's surprising victory over Krav, the atmosphere aboard the Harmonious Exchange had transformed completely. Crew members who had once avoided eye contact now watched her with open curiosity. Some even attempted small bows when she passed, a gesture Jin found both amusing and slightly embarrassing. She had just finished her morning meal when Captain Mool approached her table, all four of his hands clasped in what Jin had learned was a gesture of formal respect. Observer Jin, he began, his voice carrying a new tone of deference. The Crest delegation has requested the use of our primary cargo bay for what they're calling advanced cultural exchange sessions. They've specifically requested your participation. Jin sipped her synthetic coffee substitute. They want a rematch? Not exactly, Mool said. Commander Doc was quite clear that this would be mutual training, not competition. He seemed impressed by your performance yesterday. I'll be there, Jin agreed. She couldn't deny her own curiosity about Crest combat techniques. As the captain departed, Tak slid onto the bench across from her, orange feathers gleaming in the artificial light. Everyone's talking about what happened, the avian diplomat said without preamble. The medical team has requested all previous data on human physiology be re-evaluated. Jin smiled. Better late than never. Why didn't you just tell us? Tak asked, head tilted in genuine confusion. All this time we thought you were suffering from some kind of psychological distress and you never corrected us. I tried, Jin reminded him, but sometimes showing works better than telling. She pushed her tray aside and leaned forward. Think about it, Tak. If I had said humans train for combat as a normal part of our lives, how would the Confederation have reacted? Tak's feathers ruffled as he considered this. We would have classified you as a potential threat species. Exactly, Jin nodded. Sometimes misunderstandings have their uses. Later that day, Jin made her way to the cargo bay, wearing the lightweight exercise clothes she'd brought from Earth. When the doors slid open, she was surprised to find not just the 3 crests but nearly 20 other crew members from various species gathered in a wide circle. Commander Doc stepped forward. The human arrives, he announced, his gravelly voice carrying across the bay. After yesterday's demonstration, interest in Deathworlder combat techniques has increased. Jin surveyed the unexpected audience. Among them stood Dr. Nemo, clutching a medical scanner and looking thoroughly uncomfortable. Nearby, several engineering officers whispered excitedly to each other. Even Captain Mool stood at the back, trying to appear officially disinterested despite his obvious curiosity. I'm not qualified as a combat instructor, Jin said carefully. Krav, the security chief she had defeated, let out a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. Yet you disabled me in less than 12 minutes. That qualifies you by Crest standards. Jin couldn't argue with that logic. What did you have in mind? An exchange, Doc explained. You will demonstrate human techniques. We will share Crest methods. The others, he waved dismissively at the gathered crew, may observe and learn if they wish. For the next hour, Jin found herself in the strangest teaching position of her life. She began with basic stances and strikes, explaining the principles behind human martial arts to an increasingly fascinated audience. The Crests picked up the movements quickly, their natural combat instincts making them excellent students despite their different physiology. Your techniques emphasize using an opponent's size against them, Doc observed after Jin demonstrated a hip throw on a willing Krav. Logical adaptation for a smaller species. It's not just about size, Jin explained. helping Krav back to his feet. It's about efficiency, using minimal energy for maximum effect. Dr. Nemo, who had edged closer during the demonstration, was frantically recording data on his device. Fascinating. Your muscle control is extraordinary. You're channeling force through optimal pathways rather than relying solely on strength. Jin smiled. That's the idea, Doctor. When it came time for the Crest to demonstrate their techniques, Jin discovered that their fighting style relied heavily on their natural advantages, armor, strength, and their powerful tails. Yet there was sophisticated technique underneath, the raw power, with precision strikes targeted at an opponent's weakest points. As Jin practiced a crest-blocking maneuver, she noticed Tak attempting to mimic the movement with his wings, with limited success. Perhaps modify it, she suggested to the avian diplomat. Work with your anatomy, not against it. Tak's eyes brightened. Of course, just as you adapted your techniques for a smaller frame. The session continued with growing enthusiasm. Even species Jin would have considered physically unsuited for combat began tentatively practicing movements. A gelatinous engineer named Bloop discovered that their malleable form could absorb and redirect energy in ways that impressed even the Crests. Near the end of the session, Captain Moole finally stepped forward. I have a question, he said, his compound eyes fixed on Jin. Yesterday you defeated a trained crest warrior using techniques you practice daily, yet you claim these are merely exercises? Jin wiped sweat from her forehead, considering how to explain. Captain, humans come from a world that challenged us at every turn. We evolved not just to survive those challenges, but to push beyond them. She gestured around the cargo bay. What you're seeing isn't just combat training, it's part of our heritage. We prepare for difficulties not because we expect them, but because being prepared is part of who we are. A species that treats combat preparation as relaxation, Doc mused. No wonder Earth produced such tenacious life forms. Krav stepped forward. Show them the technique you used against me, he rumbled. The one that ended our match. Jin nodded and began explaining the blood choke maneuver. This temporarily restricts blood flow to the brain, causing unconsciousness without permanent damage. It works on many species with centralized circulatory systems. Dr. Nemo pushed forward, scanner buzzing. But how did you know where to apply pressure on a crest? Our anatomical data on their species is restricted. Jin shrugged. I didn't know for certain. But most vertebrate species have pressure points where armor or exoskeletons join. I observed where Krav's plates connected and took an educated guess. This revelation caused a stir among the watching crew. The idea that Jin had defeated Krav based on observation and adaptation rather than prior knowledge seemed to impress them, even more than the victory itself. Adaptive combat, Doc said with something like respect. You didn't just train for specific opponents, you trained to analyze and respond to any threat. That's what humans do, Jin confirmed. We prepare for the unknown. As the session concluded, Jin found herself surrounded by crew members asking questions about human training methods. The same aliens who had once monitored her episodes with concern now wanted to learn from her. Even Dr. Nemo approached, his medical scanner set aside. I owe you an apology, the amphibian doctor said quietly. I misinterpreted your activities as symptoms rather than strengths. Jin smiled. No offense taken, Doctor. Would it be possible, Nemo asked hesitantly, to include me in future training sessions? From a purely medical perspective, of course. The physiological benefits could be applicable to other species. Of course, Jin agreed, though you might want to wear something more suited to movement than your medical robes. As the crowd dispersed, Commander Doc remained behind with his 2 crest companions. The Confederation has misunderstood humans, he stated bluntly. They classified you as fragile beings from a harsh world who needed protection and treatment. Jin nodded. And how do the crests see us now? Doc's mouth stretched in what Jin had learned was his species' version of a smile. As worthy allies, with much to teach and learn. He extended his arm in the traditional crest warrior's greeting. Tomorrow we continue with advanced techniques. Prepare yourself, human. As Jin clasped his arm, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. After weeks of being studied like a psychological curiosity, she had finally been recognized for what humans truly were. Not broken beings in need of treatment, but adaptable warriors who had turned preparation itself into an art form. Word would spread from the harmonious exchange to the wider Confederation. Human stress relief would never be misunderstood again. 3 weeks had passed since Jin's match with Krav, and the harmonious exchange had transformed into something entirely unexpected. The cargo bay, once used primarily for storage and occasional diplomatic receptions, had become a bustling training center, where species from across the Confederation gathered daily. Jin wiped sweat from her brow as she finished demonstrating a sequence of movements to a group of enthusiastic aliens. Some mimicked her actions with surprising accuracy, while others had to adapt the techniques to their unique physiologies. Remember, she called out to the group, these movements aren't just about combat. They're about body awareness, control, and efficiency. At the far end of the bay, Krav was instructing another group in crest defensive stances. The security chief had become Jin's unlikely partner in this cultural exchange, his initial skepticism giving way to genuine respect. Tak fluttered over, his orange feathers gleaming with health. The avian diplomat had become one of Jin's most dedicated students, developing a modified style that incorporated his natural flight abilities. The captain asked me to remind you about the Confederation Council transmission scheduled for this afternoon, Tak said, performing a perfect mid-air spin kick that would have been impossible for any Earthbird. They're very interested in your cultural program. Jin nodded, taking a swig from her water bottle. I'll be there. How are the wing strikes coming along? Tak extended his wings proudly. Much improved. Dr. Nemo says my muscle density has increased by 12% since we began training. Speaking of the doctor, Jin spotted him across the room working with a group of medical staff. No longer content to simply study the physiological effects of training, Nemo had developed an entire regimen focused on improving circulation and joint mobility for amphibious species. Remarkable, a voice said beside her. Jin turned to find Captain Moole watching the activity with all 4 of his arms clasped behind his back. When we invited a human representative aboard this vessel, I never imagined it would lead to this. Jin smiled. Neither did I, to be honest. The Confederation Council is both concerned and intrigued, Moole continued. Some representatives worry that we're turning a diplomatic vessel into a combat training facility. And what do you think, Captain? Moole's compound eyes reflected the lights of the cargo bay. I think we've been wrong about many things, Observer. Jin, not just humans, but about the value of physical preparation itself. He gestured to where a group of engineers were practicing coordination exercises. Accident rates have decreased by 34% since your program began. Crew efficiency is up. Even sleep quality has improved across all species. Jin nodded. She'd seen the reports. Physical activity has benefits beyond combat readiness. That's something humans discovered long ago. Indeed. Moole turned to face her fully. Which is why the Council has approved your request to make this program permanent. They're calling it the Interspecies Physical Harmony Initiative. Though, I believe the crests are already referring to it as Human Battle Meditation. Jin laughed. Either name works for me. Later that afternoon, Jin stood in the communication center as the holographic projection of the Confederation Council flickered to life. 7 beings representing the governing species appeared before her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to lingering skepticism. Observer Jin, began Counselor Vrel, a crystalline being whose voice resonated like chimes. We have reviewed the reports from Captain Moole regarding your physical training program. The results are unexpected. Jin stood at parade rest, a habit from her military days. Thank you, Counselor. However, continued another counselor, a gaseous entity contained in a specialized environment suit, some concerns remain about introducing combat techniques across Confederation species. Our society has prided itself on peaceful resolution for millennia. Before Jin could respond, Commander Doc stepped into view of the transmission. The crest representative had insisted on attending, despite not being invited. With Respect counselors, Doc rumbled. You misunderstand the human approach. What they practice is not primarily for warfare but for discipline. Jin shot him a grateful look before addressing the council. Commander Doc is right. What we're teaching isn't about fighting. It's about preparation, adaptation, and personal growth. Humans don't train because we expect combat. We train because pushing our limits makes us better equipped for all of life's challenges. The counselors conferred among themselves in hushed tones before Vrel spoke again. Our initial classification of Earth as a death world led us to certain assumptions about human psychology. We believed your species suffered from trauma and stress disorders requiring treatment and protection. A natural misunderstanding, Jin acknowledged diplomatically. Yet now we find that what we interpreted as psychological damage is actually a sophisticated adaptation, Vrel continued. This changes our understanding of death world species entirely. From the back of the communication center, Dr. Nemo stepped forward, clutching his ever-present data device. If I may, counselors, my medical team has compiled extensive data on the physiological and psychological benefits of the human training methods. We're seeing improvements across all participating species, including reduced stress hormones, improved cognitive function, and enhanced immune response. The gaseous counselor's environment suit shifted colors, indicating surprise. You're suggesting these combat techniques have medical applications? Not combat techniques, Jin corrected gently. Physical disciplines? And yes, they have applications, far beyond fighting. The council deliberated again before rendering their decision. The Harmonious Exchange would become the first vessel in the Confederation fleet to host a permanent human training program. Additionally, Jin was being promoted from observer to full cultural ambassador, with authority to establish similar programs on other Confederation vessels and outposts. As the transmission ended, Captain Mool approached Jin with a formal bow. Congratulations, Ambassador Jin. It seems you've initiated quite a change in Confederation thinking. Not just me, Jin said, looking around at the others who had supported her. Doc with his warrior's perspective, Nemo with his medical expertise, and Tak with his enthusiastic advocacy. The next morning, Jin arrived at the cargo bay to find it had been transformed overnight. The makeshift training area had been replaced with proper equipment, including cushioned flooring and adaptive apparatus, suitable for various species' physiologies. A large symbol, combining Earth's continents with the Confederation starfield, had been installed on the central wall. Do you approve? Asked Krav, who stood admiring the new facilities. It's perfect, Jin replied, though I'm still getting used to being called ambassador instead of observer. Titles matter less than respect, the Crest security chief noted, and you've earned that many times over. As their students began to arrive, more numerous than ever before, Jin caught sight of Dr. Nemo leading a group of medical officers through the door. The amphibious doctor no longer carried his scanner. Instead, he wore simplified clothing suitable for movement. We're ready for today's lesson, Ambassador, Nemo called out, his usual clinical demeanor replaced with evident enthusiasm. Jin smiled and stepped to the center of the training floor. Today, we're going to focus on something humans call moving meditation. It's not about fighting at all. It's about bringing mind and body into harmony. As she began leading the diverse group through slow, controlled movements, Jin reflected on how completely the Confederation's understanding of humans had changed. What began as a misinterpreted episode had evolved into a bridge between cultures, a new appreciation of what it meant to be a species forged on a challenging world. The Crests stood alongside the avians. The amphibians practiced beside the crystalline engineers, and all of them moved together in a rhythm that transcended their biological differences. Where once they had seen a damaged being requiring treatment, they now saw a teacher sharing ancient wisdom. Later that evening, as Jin completed her personal training routine in her quarters, she received a message from Earth Command. Her mission, to foster understanding between humans and the Confederation, had been extended indefinitely. Attached was a list of additional human instructors being sent to join her program, experts in everything from yoga to martial arts to dance. Jin smiled as she toweled off her sweat. Who would have thought that her nightly kickboxing routine would lead to all this? Sometimes the greatest revelations came not from grand diplomatic gestures, but from simple, honest expressions of what it meant to be human. And somewhere in the vast Confederation database, Earth's classification had been updated. No longer was it listed simply as a death world. Now it read, Origin world of disciplined adaptability, home to a species that transforms survival into art.